right, switch over to capture age. Let me just modify the scoreboard, but I think we'll keep the player score the same. I think I was hearing some, yep, I was hearing some chickens. We're playing on the old patch, not the new patch yet. We'll start with the new patch on the third round, but the new patch should be turning down the volume of the chickens, which will be nice. All right, so we got the bright spark here. Almost said blue spark because it's plain blue, it's Blu-ray. So we got bright spark placed in his first lumber camp. And so if I'm not mistaken, bright spark does pretty much everything with DC, so manually placing the lumber camp, manually controlling the villagers. And then we've got the general down here also placing his first lumber camp. And the general is a bit more letting things happen automatically with the economy, but adding in some manual control to help take care of things when needed, such as controlling when the sheep is gathered and things like that. Yeah, so this is definitely a map, as and this is going to be a set against two of the top ranked AIs. Let me just see what the seeds are. So we've got Bright Spark, who is seed 5, against the General, who is seed 3. And normally I'd be putting top seed as blue. I kind of missed that for this game, but it's alright. The color doesn't matter. It's just visual appearance. So Bright Spark is scripted by Bandit, and I think this AI dates back to the days when he was playing in HD and making the AI for that version, but has since updated it to play on DE, and it's definitely one of the top AIs that's fun to watch. So you see the general placed in a chicken mill and also bringing in an elephant, and bringing down the elephant in a good spot. Bright Sparks is a couple tiles away from the TC, but not bad. It should only be a couple seconds of walking time, not much. And let's see. It's a pretty good timing on bringing in the elephant, but it was also killed a bit away from the TC. And then we got a mill for the forage bushes from Bright Spark. And so Bright Spark is one of the AIs that mostly controls units individually, and so we'll probably see his micro displayed in this game. The general is a bit more passive in the early game, going for a fast castle strategy, and so that can leave him vulnerable to early attacks from fleshing opponents. And of course, the general is my AI. I started scripting it right around the time the DEA came out, I think a little bit before. But then once the AI scripting community switched over to playing on DE, I definitely adapted the AI for that version of the game. Yeah, the general plays most civs, just like I think Bright Spark plays all civs. That one of the options that Bright Spark actually picked Shu as a possibility for Arabia for this tournament. But Bright Spark is playing as Goths, so we should maybe see a traditional like man-at-arms strategy, or maybe not. We'll see. And the general is playing Franks, so we'll expect some cavalry. The Night Rush was the first strategy ever added to the general, imitating some older Night Russian AIs. Someday the general will probably play a fleshing strategy, but not yet. The rules for placing the mill in the chicken, I think currently it tries to build the lumber camp first, and then place the mill for the chickens first, since it's a faster source of food than forage bushes. But it'll try to place it every single game that has chickens. It doesn't try to do any long distance chicken gathering. It could probably be a bit more sophisticated than that. I forget exactly what villager timing it has, but somewhere around like 14 villagers, something like that. And there is a little bit of code to make sure it always has some chicken gatherers, but it's not ideal. I think there's a little bit of walking time that the general is having. when villagers try to get sent to forage bushes because AIs like forage bushes more than chickens. And so we see some long distance chicken gathering. The mill's not too far away from the chickens, so it kind of works out. So the bright spark will have saved 100 food from not building the second mill. Yeah, I think chickens are always placed on the map closer than deer are. But I can't remember exactly the distance and how consistent the distances are for how far away the chickens are placed. So we see some militia coming forward from Bright Spark. And this Scoutoid trying to take a few attacks on the general's villagers. And the general has a forward gold here, so that leaves him pretty vulnerable. And this stretch might be coming in too early for general to build its forward tower. Or not forward tower, defensive tower on the mining camp. And the general's a minute away from feudal age anyway. So older versions of general used to use the number civilian militia in its defense. And so I switched it back to using 0 civilian militia, so the villagers should only be attacking back if they're attacked themselves. So we see 2 villagers already killed from the general. But it looks like the militia are changing targets a lot, so they must be like causing the villagers to try and attack the militia down. So we got another villager killed, but another militia was also killed here. So overall in KD, the generals killed off 6 units and lost 3 villagers. But I think in this case, Bright Spark is probably coming out a little ahead, just of being able to cut down that eco. And there's more militia coming forward. And so the general is about 50 gold away from getting to Castle Age. And so we're just waiting for that, I think, for the general to be able to start going up to Castle Age. And that's going to be key for the general to be able to do to stay in this game. Alright, so 30 more gold. And 10 more gold. We got a militia killed here. I dropped off 5 gold. Alright, and Castle Age is going up. We've got a vulnerable villager here, and Bright Spark is correctly attacking it. And that villager went down, so 4 villager kills for Bright Spark. We got a second stable being placed by the general. And Bright Spark is in feudal age, but hasn't researched man-at-arms yet, doesn't have the food for it. And another villager kill. Okay, so yeah, the long distance chickens being dropped off that's probably unfortunate. Alright, one militia down, the other one's down. And so one key thing is that this forward gold being attacked so often is going to slow down the general's gold gathering, which is really important to be able to train its knights it'll need for defense. But even if the general gets out a couple knights, that might be enough to be able to kill off these militia. So it looks like Bright Spark is prioritizing getting the militia training versus getting the man-at-arms upgrade. Got a mill getting placed though. Yeah, we're seeing the villagers continue to try to defend themselves from militia. The villagers with Loom have pretty much equal fighting abilities to militia, so you're kind of seeing a roughly... I was assuming that was a roughly even KD, but Actually, the general's pretty far ahead with KD. But Bright Spark is switching to Spearman, which is a good choice. So it'll be a race against who can train more units, the general getting the knights, or Bright Spark getting enough Spearmen to kill the knights off. We got general going toward its second gold here. And Bright Spark is continuing the aggressive push, getting Scale Barding, which won't help that much against the Spearmen. But the general's on got 4 knights now, with a 5th one on the way. So the important part here is, will the knights be able to knock down the spearmen quickly enough? Or one thing that can happen, because the general, when it's on kind of defend the town mode, it doesn't have any micro control. So sometimes knights can be attracted toward chasing down units, even though like some spearmen are attacking the knights. They won't like try to defend themselves against whatever spearman's attacking them. But it's not causing too much of a problem in this case. The general has enough knights to be able to take on the spearmen just one at a time now. So the general's got 37 villagers to Bright Spark's 40, but has the age advantage, and the militaries are about even. But Bright Spark continuing to send in spearmen here. And we just look at the HP counter here. Not able to get enough spearmen on the field quickly enough to keep up with the general's knights. Though these knights are getting pretty far away from the town. And if enough of them get injured... Okay, so the knights are heading back to regroup. If enough of them are caught away from the town, I was thinking that enough spearmen could kind of gang up on them and kill them off. Alright, so Spearman and Knight came down there. So the general is starting to lose some military here. Bright Spark now has double the military. Yeah, I'm curious if maybe the knights getting lured away from the town a little bit caused the numbers advantage for the knights to dwindle a little bit. Because as long as these knights can kind of gain up on a couple spearmen, the knights will be able to defend themselves pretty well. But one-on-one, the knights will will not be taking cost-effective engagements. So one thing I want to check is the economy. The general is ahead on resources collected, as the general is now a few villages ahead, but I'm curious to see how that's changed over time. So the general has been ahead pretty much the whole game. Right around this point is when the general started getting ahead. So we got a town center place, but this is going to be in a pretty... Okay. The general's wanting to build one forward on this forest here, but it's going to be hard to get one placed there while these spearmen are continuing to attack. The general's adding a third stable, and so it looks like the second TC will be delayed. Oh, they got a second TC here. The third TC might be a bit delayed. So maybe this spot will be safe now that the general's knights are defending it. Doesn't look like it. The building got canceled for some reason. And okay, it was placed here, which is probably a much better spot. The general uses just places them like lumber camps, kind of using the automatic drop site placing method to place its town centers. So I guess sometimes it's picking the lumber camp, placing it where you might decide to place the lumber camp, which I guess was right here, but then it's changed to picking this spot, which is better. Hi Kibo, nice to see you here. So the general is 3 TC booming here, which it could place it in a pretty vulnerable spot, trying to maintain villager production from all TCs. If it slows down its night production too much, Bright Spark could eventually overwhelm the general. But those TCs do add a bit more defense, but they're not really in a spot where they defend a lot of resources. Okay, so we got a castle being placed for the general. If this goes up, this could be pretty important for the general's defense. And it's in range to protect this gold here. So the castles are usually placed when the general is trying to get up to Imperial Age to try and like defend itself while its economy is vulnerable. But it does seem to be pretty early because the general is far away from having enough resources for Imperial Age. The Bright Spark looks like he's going for Castle Age, which I think at this point is probably important. The Bright Spark will need some pikemen to be able to really engage the general's knights. And maybe Bright Spark noticed this castle, and so it's going to need some rams to knock it down. But the longer that Bright Spark gives the general to boom up safely, the less his chances are of winning the game. We already have a pretty big scoring difference and have for quite a while. So we'll have to see what Bright Spark does. We got some spearmen that look like they're bugging out. I don't know if this is intentional or if they're just like trying to gather in this spot and can't get there, but hopefully this doesn't mean that the Bright Spark's whole attack is bucking out. Okay, good to hear, Bandit. Cyanide, these are AIs playing against each other, so they're not ranked on the ladder. I think these AIs are roughly around the same difficulty level as the DE AI playing on Extreme. So they might be like... maybe someone can give a link to the Night Panda's ELO ranking website that can kind of show how the AI scripting community has estimated what ELOs each AI is at. Sadly, I can't really multitask very well to try and post the links in the chat. I can't remember if Bright Spark has a lot of ratings on that website or not. But I would say the general most of the time loses against DAI, so probably a little bit weaker. And despite the score difference, I consider Bright Spark and the general to be pretty similar in strength level. I think in the ladder, Bright Spark might actually be... I forget where the Bright Spark is on the AI ladder. I can't remember if it's ahead or behind of the general. I think it's a little bit ahead of the general right now, but the general is playing on one of his stronger civs, which is the Franks. So it does a lot better when it gets some of its better civs. There's a lot of civs that the general can technically play, but it plays them pretty poorly. So the general is starting to research Imperial Age, about 2 minutes away. Meanwhile, Bright Spark has a bunch of pikemen, probably waiting to attack, because the general has a couple castles, and you can't really take those out with just pikemen. But I'm not seeing a siege workshop from Bright Spark, so that will be needed before Bright Spark can really take on the general at this point. It's also possible that Brightspark is just trying to boom up as much as he can to catch up to the general, play defensively until Imperial Age, and hopefully get up to 200 pop to where it can then be an even game. Looks like these pikemen are stalling this lumber camp from being built, and that villager finally gave up. Thanks, Waddle, for showing that link to that website. Alright, so the generals advanced to the Imperial Age, researching Cavalier, also adding a couple infantry upgrades. So we'll see, I think that might be because the general's adding throwing axemen. Unfortunately, we're not seeing the improvements to the throwing axemen in the recent patch that adds extra range and makes them train faster and gets the elite upgrade cheaper. So these will just be the kind of the OG throwing axemen balance. And the main reason we're doing this on the old patch for this round, round 2 of the tournament, is to give AI scripters some time to test out the new patch, make sure that it doesn't have any bugs for their AIs, and then for round 3 we will run the tournament on the new patch. Alright, so we've got some soldiers moving out from the general. So we've got... let's get some upgrades on these. We got the +4 armor, but +2 attack on the Cavalier. And throwing axemen just have the Castle Age upgrades in right now, but are getting the +4 armor. Alright, here we go. So we've got almost 60 pikemen from Brightspark. Let's see how well these defend. So we got some throwing axemen, which will take out a few of the pikemen, but I'm not sure if the general has enough army to really be able to take out all of these pikemen. But I guess I take that back. Maybe having all of the throwing axemen really made a difference, because we can see most of the Brightspark's units have simply been killed off, and the main TC is being targeted by trebuchets. Now I'm wondering where Brightspark's panic stations are. I'll see if the general finds them. But I think this game is over. Yep. Looks like Brightspark is calling GG. Alright, so just taking a look at the graphs here. We've got an economy difference. Yeah, military, Brightspark was ahead in military for most of the game, but wasn't able to break through and damage enough of the general's town. I don't know if it's just due to not getting the man-at-arms upgrade in time, due to having a slower economy with the chickens. But you can just see the general getting ahead in economy. I think Brightspark was able to get ahead temporarily because of idling the general's economy, and the general slowing down villager production to get to Castle Age. But the militia just weren't able to do enough damage. Alright, so let's hop over to the game just to look at the game stats here. Flip through these windows here for anyone who wants to see them. Alright, so on to the arena map. And these AIs play on different civilizations. So let's see, Brightspark plays Turks and Bulgarians. Or rather, is chosen to play with one of these two civs. Goss and Chu are removed off, and it was Brightspark, Turks and Bulgarians. That was the other civ. Classic arena civ. And the general just goes for Burgundians right now in arena for this tournament. Yeah, definitely glad to for the opportunity to have some bug fixes before round 3. So it'll be great to see Bright Spark with that chicken drop fixed, because definitely want to see it playing at its full strength. All right, so we got game 2 started here. Flip over to Capture Age. And looks like we might need to update the player names. So we got Turks for Bright Spark, and as expected we have Burgundians for the General. And we got the view of the General first. We also have another chicken arena map. Is the chickens drop, does that affect Bright Spark on arena as well? Yeah, the 1 point to the General. Alright, so not a whole lot to see here with Bright Spark. We got a scout who is idle at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that scout will resume doing stuff here pretty soon. Probably explored all that's needed at the base. Yeah, for the most part. There's nothing back here to see. Alright, so the General's got the lumber camp up. And Bright Spark's bringing in the boar. Yeah, let's see. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 to 11 tiles away for the chickens. Yeah, so Bright Spark's chickens are about this way, this far away from the TC. So I think the chickens are generated about the same, but they somehow do look closer than Bright Spark's do. Looks like they're both about 10 or 11 tiles away from the TC. I do feel like they're generated a bit closer on Arena than they are in Arabia, but I'm not sure. I'd have to check the map script. Alright, so the General going for the boar. I think it's his second boar, yeah. So we got lumber camp for Bright Spark. And we got the food for the wood for mill. It's getting placed on berries first. Makes sense. And we got a second mill on berries for the General. Yeah, I forget if I, just regarding your comment, Bandit, for the General playing as Burgundians, I think I must have, like, added the ability for the Burgundians to research Cavalier, or maybe the requirements for Cavalier automatically just work for the Burgundians. I don't know if it, if researching Cavalier immediately is, like, the way to go for a FC build. But it seems to work out a lot of cases to where, like, Burgundians are probably one of the above average civs for the General on Arabia, just because of the Night Rush being one of its better strategies. My hope is, like, someday to make the General a more diverse AI, especially... Like, one of the nice things about having lower difficulty options for the General, like the Lieutenant, like those commanders, is I can leave the General to be the AI that plays a bit more meta and high strength strategies. But something I'd like to do, especially with the lower difficulty settings, is add the ability to kind of vary up the units it goes for. Like... a lot of the strategies that I have currently are fast castle strategies. So it'd be kind of funny to see it go for, like, I don't know, a long swordsman rush, even though it's pretty weak. But I just like to see the variety of different units it can go for. Because I don't want to be the general just be like a one strategy only AI. So I think most people saw the strategy that the general goes for with Burgundians in the last round, where it goes into scouts that try to patrol around the relics, and then goes into its boom. A pretty common strategy for Arena. And I think, if I remember right, Brightspark went for a castle drop with, I think, yeah, it was Bulgarian, so adding conics. So I think Brightspark's strategy would be a bit more aggressive here. We'll see how that goes. Something that I added for Arena was the ability to defend when an AI is attacking the walls, playing aggressively. So we'll see if that technique kicks in or not, depending on what Brightspark does. All right, so we got Brightspark gathering the chickens here, a bunch of long distance. We'll see what happens to the villager behavior and if they're doing a lot of retasking or not. So the general is the first to feudal age. Brightspark's currently ahead by 4 villagers. And not necessarily due to ILTC, I think that's just the age up times. So far the chicken gathering seems to be fairly normal. Though it seems to have redirected a fair amount of the chicken gatherers to other resources. Brightspark is needing the mining camp here seems to be waiting to build one. But I don't know if this wood is being saved for other military buildings or other things in feudal age. But we got the mining camp placed now. So we got blacksmith, we got market. So I think Brightspark had enough wood to place that mining camp without disrupting the construction of these buildings, but maybe not. Alright, so the general's about a little less than 2 minutes away from Castle Age. And Brightspark's ahead by 1 villager. But unfortunately, Brightspark has a pretty large amount of ILTC time. Might have a pretty decent food stockpile from just not training villagers for about a minute. But we'll see if that economy drop off from having fewer villagers will cost Brightspark or not. So the general has trained 1 scout and is in the process of making 2 more. Alright, so still looking at the strategy that Brightspark is going for. It doesn't look to be gathering stone, so that probably means that the Turks don't go for a castle drop, like a forward castle like the Bulgarians did. Which makes sense. I think the classic strategy for Turks is to go for a fast Imperial. I don't know if that's what the meta strategy is for Turks anymore, but it's definitely a famous one. So we got a monastery and a siege workshop, so this is looking like a fast Imperial. In the meantime, the general has his scouts patrolling and attacking this scout. Okay, we got light cav upgrade in. Alright, so the Brightspark scout is down. Meanwhile, we got the first monastery being built by the general. Again, the first cav armor upgrade. Taking a look at the chat here. Yeah, Duke Pegasus, I think pretty much all of the AIs that this AI scripting community has are scripted by hand. So I'm not as knowledgeable about like trying to use an API. I think usually we'll use terms like the AI engine, but pretty much all of these are people manually writing the AI scripting code in its original language. Some people will create some compilers to be able to use like C++ or Python or something like that to create their scripts in a language that they're more familiar with. But a lot of these AI scripters have kind of made these for fun over the course of several months or years, and their strength slowly grows over time. But they weren't made with any sort of like deep learning like you might see in some other games or processes. These are really just computer programs running code like a standard program. Yeah, there might have been an API made by someone. I know that Matty B. Rad, I think is his name, was trying to do some reinforcement learning to make an AI called Alpha. And he might have been, if I remember, he might be one that had made an API so that people could do that on their own. Let's see. These Lycav were about to go to that relic, but they might have just missed that monk. So they'll be able to protect this relic for this monk. Taking a look at the relics that have been gathered so far, the general has 2, while Brightspark has 1 and is bringing back a second. So the general will get 3 relics, while the general has 2. The general's way ahead on economy since the general goes for a broom. Brightspark went for a fast imperial, so it is higher on the military numbers. But the Brightspark will have to start an attack soon to be able to take advantage of his age advantage. Yeah, I think what Matty found with trying to train his alpha AI is he was relying on basically, instead of being able to gather multiple stats throughout the game, he was mostly just relying on running the games really fast, and if an AI won the game, that was its only real learning technique. Its only reward system was just winning the game, so it learned really slowly was what he found. And if he made an API to be able to do some reinforcement learning, he might have not added enough abilities to be able to go like a full reinforcement learning like you would need for a lot of other applications. Okay, it looked like Brightspark was about to attack, but looks like it's calling in the hand cannoners back. It might be trying to form up a group. I'm not exactly sure. Alright, so the general's up to 80 villagers on 4 TCs. Brightspark is at 37. Growing in military numbers has a bomber cannon being created. So, yep, there we go. I think that bomber cannon will be key for Brightspark to be able to cause some damage here. And I'm curious to watch Brightspark's micro that it might have with this bomber cannon, or to see if it's just using standard behavior where it usually attacks units more than buildings. And I thought Brightspark was about to attack, but it looks like it's not. But I think we'll see him attack soon. Meanwhile, the general has a few cavalier and get the gold mining upgrade, but is overall just playing pretty passively. I think we'll see the general trying to get up to Imperial Age here pretty soon. Actually, very soon. Has enough resources to start researching, so once we get a TC that's idle, I think we'll start seeing the... Oh, I see. The general's actually waiting for the second Castle Age building, which is the university. That's kind of an oops there. Needed that building a lot sooner. But it looks like the general noticed an attack here and sending out sending in the cavalry to take them out. So it's unfortunate Bright Spark that didn't have these cannons defended. And I think the general has some code to retreat units that are too far away from the base when it's not attacking, which is kind of unfortunate here. Probably should refine that behavior a bit more. But Bright Spark has broken in. It looks like the town defense system that I was talking about. Okay, so the general's trying to add in a tower here. It basically tries to build a tower near where the enemy attacks the walls. I don't know if this gate or some wall pieces here were attacked, but this might be the closest space it could find to build. Alright, so we're seeing some fighting here. And the general's castle is under attack. And so we're seeing some units being taken out by the general, but the general keeps on calling them back in. We got some monks, which might just be killed off by... Okay, so we got this cavalier converted back, and we got some cuirassiers get inch range. But Bright Spark is definitely ahead on military numbers. And I'm curious to see if the general's trying to add in some counter units. We got some skirmishers being trained, and we got the archer armor. Imperial Aid should be arriving in 10 seconds. We'll see if this tower does anything. So we got a ram coming in. This is that. Okay. Once this castle is getting attacked by the ram, hopefully we get some units that start attacking the ram. Or we got some villagers coming in to defend instead. That'll sort of do the trick temporarily. But we got a cuirassier being converted and then killed by the castle. Got a monk converting here, but it was killed off by the castle. Now the stable being constructed by the general. So it looks like the initial attack was held off by the general. But this castle is pretty... it's pretty damaged, so if Bright Spark can knock it down before the general has enough stone for a second castle, that could give it a big opening. And so these skirmishers have castle age upgrades except for elite skirmisher. Hopefully that comes in soon. And these hand cannoneers only have the +1 armor right now. I don't know how important the armor is for the hand cannoneers. Maybe numbers are more important. But it seems like getting the castle age armor might help a bit. Alright, got another archer range going up and another stable. And we got a villager repairing the castle, which is important. Something I haven't added to the general is the ability to send in multiple villagers to repair the castle. That might be something that I added at some point. Alright, we got another attack coming in. The Bright Spark has added in some camos, which is nice. No upgrades on them yet. And I'm curious why those camos didn't have the attack displayed in Capture Age. But the general actually has a larger army than Bright Spark at this point due to his higher eco. So this castle is no longer being repaired, but we got a new castle going up to help defend anyway. So we got a late skirmisher, and we got infantry armor coming in. I think it's okay. We just got blast furnace for the cuirassier and cavalier. I think sometimes the general just decides to research the first infantry armor upgrade, even just to prepare in advance, just in case it needs to train infantry in the future. I think it'd probably do the same for the first cavalry armor upgrade, just because it's so important to be able to transition into cavalry later in the game. And I'm curious to see if that means that the general's actually switching into infantry. I don't see any extra barracks being built, so I don't think so. It should still be skirmishers and cavalier and cuirassier for the next while. So just looking at the numbers, it looks like the general strategy was able to hold off Bright Spark's initial attack, and now it's just kind of waiting for the attack to start, which it has. Yeah, so we'll watch the defense from Bright Spark's end, but Bright Spark is outnumbered 2-1 at this point. Yeah, it looks like Bright Spark is not trying to defend the walls. We got a Scorpion here, which is providing some defense, but probably not sufficient. Got the trebuchets maybe attacking. Okay, they're attacking the wall pieces instead of the gate, but they'll break in regardless. We got some Turk spearmen. Unfortunately, not going to do a whole lot in defense, so the general's broken through. Some soldiers continuing to attack the gate. Yeah, the tourney ELO spreadsheet includes a whole bunch of tournaments where it included AIs from even a couple decades ago. There's some really good old AIs that were really good for their time, and we've had a few tournaments that show how those AIs compared to some of the more modern AIs, which at this point most of the old AIs from even over 10 years ago just can't face the modern AIs of today. But it's always kind of fun to see how some new AIs face up against the old ones. But, like for example in this tournament, which is only including modern AIs, we have 20 different AIs participating, so there's always a healthy community of people who find this as a really fun and kind of creative, but also like problem-solving hobby. And so it's fun to kind of see them face off against each other. All right, so it looks like the general took both games against Bright Spark. Just taking a look at the different graphs here. So we saw the attack come in against the general. The general had a few losses, but Bright Spark lost most of his military. And then the general was able to just outproduce Bright Spark because of its bigger economy. Now let's take a look at the endgame stats.